Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon. This is Scale Your Sales podcast. Welcome to the Scale Your Sales podcast, listed number 9 of 42 best podcasts for every sales professional in 2021. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, recommended by LinkedIn as one of 15 innovative sales influencers to follow in 2021. In this episode of Scale Your Sales podcast, my guest talks about her experience of being the only woman in the room working in the East, so whether it's Japan or China, and how she navigated her way by using curiosity, by being really open and not having the arrogance of thinking you know it all. So she spent over 12 years in the culture and absolutely loves it to today. But she is also the founder of Women in Tech Forum, a global membership coaching platform to help people accelerate and grow their career in tech. Prior to founding her company, as I said, she held leadership positions in world-leading tech companies, including SAP, TripAdvisor, and Mimecast. She is awarded the 10 most impactful women in tech 2021 by Analytics Insight magazine. Welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Angie Vo.
Thank you very much, Janice, for having me today.
Well, I really want to get into why you founded the Women in Tech Forum, why you saw a need for this global membership organization for the coaching to help accelerate the careers of women in tech.
Great question. So I've been in the tech industry myself for close to 25 years. During that time, I was mostly the only woman in the room, both sort of at work, but also working with the clients as well. So I understand the challenges that women face being the minority in the tech industry, and also some of the invisible barriers that hold women back. And Women in Tech Forum started out as a hobby 3 years ago, as a passion to give back to the next generation of women in tech, to help them connect with other industry role models, with their peers, to share experiences, but also to equip them with the skills, the confidence, the tools to help them build a successful career in the industry, whether they're in sales, marketing, engineering.
What started you on that path? It started as a bit of a hobby. Why?
I have a genuine desire to create positive change in the industry as a whole, and to create an industry that is more inclusive, more diverse, where everyone has a voice, where everybody feels included. And, historically, organizations were designed by men for men. And, it is difficult for women to succeed and to move into the C-suite. Previous research said that 5% of women hold leadership positions in the UK tech sector. I think now that's changed. I think Deloitte has just published a survey to say that they expect 25% of board positions to be held by women in the broader industry sector. I felt there was a need to equip women with the tools to help them overcome some of the invisible barriers that hold them back. The boys' club is still very much alive, in the industry, and we need to sort of change that. We need to create more senior female role models to pave the way for future generations of women and diverse groups.
You've spent a long time being the only woman in the room in the tech sector, working, across the globe, and particularly in Asia. Perhaps share some of your experiences, because there must have been a bit of a light bulb when you thought, I've just had enough of this, I need to do something about it. And maybe there's differences in the kind of East and West culture. It'd be great to understand your experiences.
I think probably one of the challenges is when you're in it yourself, you don't necessarily appreciate some of the challenges that you're facing. Because I just got on with it. You know, I've spent my whole career in this industry, so I sort of fit the mold. So I dress like a man. I wore a trouser suit every day with a pinstripe, you know, masculine shirt, hair tied back. I was lucky enough to be part of the boys club, which meant I was going to strip clubs. I was out drinking till 4 a.m. in the morning. And you don't really sort of realize it, you know, at the time, because you just did it. And, you know, I was coached by men, you know, and mentored by men. And by the way, this wasn't a negative experience. I had a great career. I had great career opportunities, but I also fitted a mold. And so it's taken me, you know, it's something I still work on now, is having that authenticity, to have your authentic voice, to speak up, to be feminine, you know, for not being judged by the clothes that you wear, you know, your makeup, you know, anything like that. And so, you know, that sort of was sort of my experience, but it wasn't negative. It was very positive. I think going into Asia, there were different complexities and different challenges. First of all, I was very young. I was in my 20s, and I looked young as well. It's a, you know, very much a patriarchal environment, and you know, and I was then the only white person, and so you know, it's very different. It's, you know, particularly working, you know, in Japan, China, it's very difficult to be accepted. And people would often, you know, in the beginning, just kind of like nod to me and then just completely ignore everything I've said. But, you know, I was lucky that I had my allies around. I had my board sponsors, which helped to propel me forward in, you know, those, you know, different cultures that I wasn't familiar with. You know, I took a lot of time to learn about kind of cultural norms, what to do, what not to do, you know, how to dress, how to behave. And I made sure that I learned a little bit of the language, just basic pleasantries wherever I went. And that went a long way. And it showed, you know, as the sort of female Westerner, you know, who in their mind probably didn't know anything about their culture, which was also true. So, you know, so you do learn a lot along the way. And I think you have to have that openness to learn, that openness to understand different ways of doing business in different countries. And I did make mistakes. I remember when I went to Japan, I was so sort of work focused that I didn't, you know, they'd organized all of these sightseeing trips for me for the whole day, and I didn't go because I was too busy. But actually that is part of being, you know, welcomed into the Japanese culture and to connecting with the senior executives and part of the ceremony that you have as well. So you know, I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but you learn and grow from those. And I then went on to have a very successful career in Asia for 12 years.
So what led you to come out of that culture? You did so much work to embed yourself in and had a successful career. Why are you not there now?
Actually, it was never my intention to come back, in all honesty. So I came back for family reasons, but given the choice, I would have stayed there, I think, until I retired and beyond. It was such a great experience. I loved working with all of the different cultures. I love to travel as well. So, you know, being in the region, constantly exposed to different foods, different people, different cultures, you know, different holidays. It was fantastic.
So there must have been some people that you saw, I mean, been there for 12 years, that came out to do a similar sales role and just didn't embed in the culture, didn't fit or didn't last. What was it that kept you sticking and others that, you know, it didn't work for them?
So I think there can be a certain arrogance, I think, when you're brought out from the West to the East with some executives. You know, typically business practices are, much more advanced. Typically, the companies are headquartered outside of Asia. I think if you come in with this arrogance that you know everything and everything has to be done your way, and you don't have the appreciation for the cultural nuances in every country that you're working in, then you're not going to succeed, because you just won't have, over time, you just won't have that respect. And then once you lose the respect of people, you're not going to get the best out of them, and you're not going to succeed as a leader either.
That's really interesting. That must be do you think there's a particular attitude that you need to have? And, if you've grown up in an environment where you've traveled as a younger person, do you think that makes a difference? Or, how you're schooled? What are the things that create that kind of attitude and behavior so that you can go to other parts of the country, other parts of the world, and easily assimilate and embed yourself into that culture?
So I think for me, I've always had a curiosity for travel. I've always had a curiosity for languages. I'm a linguist. I speak 4 languages. So that's always been embedded in me. But I think that's more me as opposed to my upbringing. I'm from a working class background. I went to a state school, I took a government grant to go to university. So, I wasn't really surrounded by people who had really, good corporate jobs. So I think you have to have that curiosity, I think, to succeed. You've got to have that determination as well. It's hard. I hated my first 6 months. But actually, if you're open, and I think you have to be humble as well, and you will make mistakes. I think that's a thing. So you have to be willing to hear the feedback, listen to it, and take action. And I think for me, and I hope others think the same, is always assume positive intent. So people will make mistakes and they're not aware of them, but the intent behind it was not malicious. It was just, so I think being curious, being humble, being determined, and you have to really want to fit in as well. I don't think you can come in as a Westerner into Asia and just expect to fit in and expect to take the ways that you're used to and expect them to fit in everywhere else. So you have to have that adaptability.
I really love what you had to say, and I think it's a real education. We're living in a global economy. I mean, really, it is. Since the pandemic and everything's online, you can trade with anybody that has internet. So I wonder then, given that so much transaction and relationship building is online, so you can be anywhere in the world, all of these nuances that you're talking about that are so important when you're in person in the culture, how much of that translates when you're working online?
That's a great question. And I think, as you said, working online for Women in Tech Forum has given us an opportunity to expand globally, and to have a much bigger impact with a much bigger audience. So the pandemic for us, whilst it was challenging initially because we were running in-person events in London every month, we quickly digitized our offering, and we expanded globally, which is great. How do you pick up on those nuances? It's a great question. For me, one of the things that I do for every event that we run is I keep it really interactive, which means that even if my own sort of talk track or questioning track, or it just gives an opportunity for people to give their perspective, which means, if it's different to what we're talking about, that's great. So that interaction for me is key. Again, it's about being curious. It's about asking questions and including people in the community as well. We are a community platform, by the community, for the community. But also what we are launching now is different groups to help with those different cultural nuances. So we are launching a Women of Colour in Tech, and that, you know, will be inclusive of all different people from different backgrounds who will have different experiences. You know, as a Black woman in tech would be very different from an Asian woman in tech, or very different from a South Asian person in tech. So we're running a think tank next month, and then the program will be built based on the feedback by different groups as well.
I would imagine that being a global organization and having the theme of tech, women in tech, the great thing is if companies expanding into a particular market, they have this whole source of knowledge that they can leverage, that they couldn't get anywhere else, really, about understanding not only the gender, the culture, but the tech environment as well. Absolutely fascinating. And I think it's great what you're doing. So, you know, in terms of diversity in the way that you're organizing the organization, the stats of women in tech are pretty poor, and yes, there are projections that they will the numbers will increase. But we all know in the last 2 years, due to COVID, there's a lot of women that have left industries. They've, you know, the kind of contracts that they've been on, that there's a lot less women in industry than there used to be prior to them. So in order to get back to pre-pandemic, we've still got a long way to go, let alone progressing. So I wonder if those projections will actually pan out unless something changes. And what do you think, what's your view on what needs to change to make sure we do actually hit that target, the 25% that you mentioned?
I think there are a number of different things that we need to do collectively and also at a government level as well. I think the first one is starting with schools and making sure that we create a picture where, you know, whether you're from, you know, a woman, whether you're or a girl or from a different background, that there are opportunities for you. So I think that education, particularly of the STEM subjects, and, you know, creating, you know, showing role models, you know, making sure that the curriculum is inclusive, the books that we teach as well. So I'm on the board of diversity at my children's school, and we're looking at the curriculum, we're looking at the plays that they do, the books that they read. You know, we educated the parents on diversity for children. So I think a lot needs to be done at a school level, and introducing children to sort of role models and to create that excitement to go into the tech sector. I think the university sector also needs to have a bit of a shake-up. I've spoken to a number of females who graduated from computer science in the last year or two, where they were excluded from group projects because they were a woman and they had to do their group work by themselves. And I can't believe in this day and age at a university and multiple universities that this is still happening. So there is wide scale change we need to create at, you know, starting from school children all the way up. And then where we are currently in industry, we still only have a finite pool. So, you know, we have to remember that is how are we going to hit these stats of 30, 40, 50%, because that pool is not changing right now, or it's changing, you know, at a very slow rate. And then, as you mentioned, we've got women dropping out of the workforce, particularly, you know, if they have started to have a family, or maybe they've got elderly parents. Organizations really need to look at their policies. They need to look at how are they catering for women with families and men. It's not just women, but, you know, flexible working, 4-day week, part-time. How are they encouraging women to return back to the workplace as well? So a lot of companies now, particularly the larger tech companies, have female returner to work policies. They're looking at other diverse groups, maybe not neurodiversity. So we need to create an environment where women thrive, where they can fulfill, you know, whatever requirements they may have, whether it be family, you know, elderly parents, and also have a career. So I think that is still an untapped market. And I think the smarter companies now are starting to tap into that pool of talent.
Excellent, excellent. So what tried and tested strategy would you offer listeners to enable them to scale their sales?
Scaling your sales. So I think, you need to have a clear offering. You need to be clear on your value proposition. You have to be passionate first and foremost about the products and services that you're selling, because if you're not passionate about it, you can't expect other people to. The other big differentiator is we're in an age where, a lot of products and features and functions are largely the same, give or take. So what differentiates it is, who are they buying from? What's the customer service that they provide? What rapport do they have? So I would really invest in, building your rapport with your prospects, with your clients, making sure that you've got a good presence online as well. I think 70% of research is done before purchasing online, before they even speak to a salesperson. So, so making sure that you've got a good presence, that you're building a rapport with your audience. And I think from there you will reap the rewards. And it sounds very basic, but not everybody does it.
Certainly not. So, who is your hero or shero?
Oh, great question. So I love actually the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. I loved what she did in the pandemic, on how she managed the pandemic. She took action very quickly and decisively. She even organized press conferences for children when no adults were allowed, and spoke to them on their level in a way that made sense for them. I think she is a very strong leader, but also she displays empathy, vulnerability, compassion. And she shows that you don't have to fit the old stereotype command and control style of leader, that actually you can encompass those feminine qualities and still be very effective and powerful as a leader.
I can see why she is a hero from you, having talked about, the way you used to dress, and how you embedded yourself in a particular culture, very male dominated culture, and actually then the realization that you can be authentically you, and that's okay. So I love the way that that's come full circle, so thank you for that. So how can listeners get hold of you?
So you can follow me and connect with me on LinkedIn, Angie-Vo, VAUX, and also follow us on our company webpage as well, Women in Tech Forum. But also I'm open to email techforum.com.
Excellent, excellent. So thank you so much for being a guest and giving us all of that insight and knowledge about being a global leader and how you need to adapt and be curious. I love that. Thank you so much for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Angie-Vo.
Thank you so much, Janice. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.